Welcome to the Neuro Air podcast, the show for cycle breakers, parents, young adults, and helping professionals ready to understand their nervous system through a generational lens, heal what isn't theirs to carry, and consciously choose what comes next. Hi, I'm your host, Leanna Hunt, an associate clinical mental health counselor and certified performance coach. Each week, you'll get stories, science, and somatic practices, plus my signature 4N framework: notice, name, nurture, and navigate, to help you honor resilience, break silence, and build deeper connection with yourself and those you love, all while shaping a legacy of safety, freedom, and possibility. Hello, everybody. I just want to welcome you back to the podcast and let you know that I am beyond excited. It literally felt like Christmas morning all over again because I have Dr. Karen Curry-Parker here with me today. So Karen, can you say hi?
Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here. We're going to have a great conversation.
It's a conversation I've been looking forward to having for a really long time. But before we dive into that, I just want to let you guys know a little bit about Dr. Parker and her work. Dr. Parker is a leading voice in the field of human design and the founder of Quantum Human Design, a revolutionary system that blends science and spirituality to help people heal from burnout and reclaim their vitality. With over 3 decades of experience as a human design educator, and I'd like to add one of the OG human design people in the whole world, she's a TEDx speaker and best-selling author. She has guided thousands worldwide to realign with their authentic selves and rediscover their creative power, including my own. Her work integrates insight from quantum physics, epigenetics, and narrative coaching to empower lasting transformation and resilience. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
It's literally been a dream of mine. I wanted to take a minute, and you might know this, but I wanted to just tell everybody how I first found out about you. Do you know this?
I don't know this.
Okay, so years ago when I had started my coaching practice, I was introduced to human design, and I still felt like I didn't know. Like, a coach is like, let me give you this chart, and she gave me a little session, but I still didn't really know. I didn't know about you. I didn't know about quantum human design. So she recommended this book. Here it is, if you're watching on YouTube. So Understanding Your Clients Through Human Design by Robin Wynn, who's a therapist, which is another really interesting component. But up here at the very top of the book, it says Forward by Karen Curry-Parker. And so I read that forward, and that led me to find your work and your world and learn from you for the last 4 or 5 years, get certified in various levels. And so I'm just wondering, based on me sharing that for you, if that's a good intro into a little bit about human design and how energy works.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to get started. And I love that you found me through Robin's work too, because Robin was also a student of mine for a lot of years. So
Cool.
So yeah. Yeah. So human design is a personality assessment system. I think that's probably a good label for it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think of it really so much as a personality assessment system as I think of it really more as a tool to help you decode your personal story so that you can recode it in the way in which you choose to tell your own story. It is a system that is a synthesis of Eastern and Western astrology, the Chinese I Ching, the Hindu chakra system, Judaic Kabbalah, and a little bit of quantum physics. But really what it is, it's a system that blends ancient and modern cross-cultural archetypes. In other words, it's a system that uses parts of the human story to help you understand your parts of your human stories. You can tell your story the way you decide to. It is based on birth date, so it's very much astrologically based. So at the moment of your birth, the planets lock in certain codes. Interesting to note that this is not scientifically valid, but certainly in the teachings of human design, or I would say verified, maybe not valid, but verified teachings of human design, it is hypothesized that elements of your chart relate to your family lineage, to your grandparents in particular, and some of their characteristics and their traits. It gives us a code for what archetypes tend to show up more in the body and how to interpret the body and the underlying archetypal themes that might be contributing to dis-ease in the body or other parts of your life. It gives you a healing path for any of you who have disconnected from your body as a compass, which is something, we talk about a lot in the work that both you and I do, that when we check out of the body, which most of us do in some way, shape, or form, because the body often very clearly is communicating what we need to do and what we need to do to stay safe. And oftentimes we don't have the ability to follow those options. So we check out of the body so that we follow the prescripted or the safe path instead of the path that's really more aligned with our authentic self. So it gives you sort of a prescription for how to get back in your body and how to start making a different set of decisions so that you're really choosing yourself for yourself.
I love what you just said, choosing yourself for yourself. Because I mean, maybe you feel this too, especially when you first meet somebody or working, that person, most people are generally out of alignment with themselves. Would you say that that's true?
I would say that's like 99.9% true.
And how do you first explain that to somebody when you realize, maybe before they do, that they're out of alignment with themselves, especially if they don't even know what the word alignment means?
Right, right. I hate that word. It's like, what is that? It's sort of
What is it?
So I don't start there. I always
Okay.
start with, let's look at what are the symptoms of misalignment in your life,
Mhm.
because that's usually why people are seeking help, right? They're looking for help because something's going on with their body, or something's going on with their relationships, or something's going on with their money, or something's going on with their creative fulfillment or their career, or even something's going on sometimes in their sense of meaning and purpose and their spiritual connection. And when they experience that disruption and wellness in those key areas of their lives, that's when they start to look for help. And I don't find that it's usually surprising to people when we start to break down, like, why is this not working for you? And, when we start talking about, well, maybe what's happening is the degree of pain that you're experiencing is directly related to the amount of distance there is between the life you're living and the life your soul is calling you towards, or your authentic self. And I would say certainly the greater that space is, the greater that misalignment is, then the greater the pain that we are experiencing in every area of our life. I mean, I would label that dis-ease, right? That's disease.
And there's a lot of that in the world right now.
For sure.
So, how do you see that disease? Because I think, as far as my work with the nervous system and generational patterns, how do you see that disease as far as nervous system stuff?
Well, basically what happens is when we experience trauma, and I have a very broad definition of trauma because I think,
Name.
yeah, I mean, we have sort of standard textbook definitions of trauma, and
Right.
I don't want to minimize those because those are
Mhm.
certainly, active and true definitions of trauma. But I personally teach that anytime we start to internalize the message that it's not okay or safe for us to be who we are and how we are, and consequently, as a result of that, we oftentimes lose our connection to our right place in the world, right? Feeling like we belong, feeling like we have purpose and meaning with our lives. That when we internalize that message, we experience that as trauma. The body reacts to that as trauma. The nervous system reacts to that as trauma. So what happens, I'll call that micro PTSD, right? When we have that level of PTSD, the body reacts just as if it would to a PTSD response to macro trauma. So whenever you encounter your nervous system and your body encounters an experience that feels similar to whatever caused you to internalize that message of it's not okay or safe for me to be who I am or
Hmm.
who I am, then the body reacts and it reacts and the nervous system reacts and it reacts in a protective capacity, right? We go into low grade fight or flight, cortisol, adrenaline responses,
Hmm.
creativity, and the creative parts of the brain shut down. We start to react and we act out in response, the same patterned response to that, whatever that trigger was, again and again and again. And every time we encounter it, it gets more and more pattern in the body and in the nervous system. And we start to cultivate a life that is nothing but a never ending reactive pattern of self protection.
Well, yeah, because everything, right? If we look at that oldest part of the brain, like everything comes down to survival,
Right. Right. But it's more complicated in humans.
right?
You know, if it was my dog has a pretty clear survival
Hmm.
instinct, but we have we're not purely instinctive beings. We have existential issues. And I don't think maybe my dog does have existential.
How would you know for certain?
But we encounter the world. We're not only encountering the world through survival of the body, which is really, I'd say, where the dogs are, but
Hmm.
rather we're encountering the world through the survival of ourself. Self is, goes beyond the body, and we start to experience then existential fears like the fear of inadequacy or a fear of a future or the fear of the past or a
Hmm.
fear of, and our body, our nervous system reacts to those as if we're dying.
For sure.
And we get stuck in these very paralyzing, contracting patterns that keep us from optimizing our full potential. And from, if we want to look at Maslow, from self actualizing who we are in the world.
For sure. Yeah, that's so powerful when we start to look at it that way. The other thing when you kind of talked about fight or flight, one of the newer layers of the nervous system, I don't know how long it's been, is talking about fawning. I like to go with appeasement, which, people pleasing. How do you think that that shows up in human design work? Like when somebody's learning about decoding.
Right. Well, so I like the word appeasement. That's a great word.
So that's Deb Dana's term. She's like, I don't really like fawn, but I resonate more with appeasement. And so I think that when we understand what appeasement actually is, a lot of people actually resonate with that, especially young adults that I'm working with currently.
Totally, totally. So, one of the things that the human design chart shows you is it shows you how you experience energy. And I think what's so
Mm,
really elegant about human design is it starts to give you a vocabulary to talk about and process and understand the kinds of energies that you are experiencing. So, to a certain degree, almost all of us are what I would consider to be, I would say all of us are sensitive,
mm,
designed to be sensitive, right? We're designed to interact with each other and to be able to read each other and to sense each other and to know each other. And depending on the unique configuration of your particular chart, it's going to show you where and what kind of energy you're taking in. So, for example, half of us are technically, according to human design, emotional empaths, meaning half of us have a powerful ability to be able to read a room emotionally. And if you've experienced trauma or you are growing up in a household where it's not okay or safe for you to be who you are and how you are, and then on top of that, you're emotionally empathic,
mm,
that capacity to be able to read that room energetically becomes a survival strategy, right? You
mm,
walk in
mm-hmm,
and be able to read what's mom feeling today and where's she at and what kind of messages are going to potentially come at me if she's not in a good place.
mm-hmm,
And if you are emotionally empathic, then one of the strategies you might learn to manage that energy and to stay in a way you're almost trying to regulate the energy in the room instead of regulating yourself, you start to become a people pleaser, right? You learn to give everybody everything that they need, or you learn to be good, or you learn to be nice, you
mm-hmm.
learn to not deal with the difficult conversations that need to be dealt with, right? And it all gets swept under the table. And that becomes an artifact of how you're configured. And when you understand that, you start to be able to confront that energy, to be able to navigate it without losing your connection to yourself. And you consequently learn eventually how to self regulate no matter what else is going on in the room.
That's so, so powerful because that whole appeasement level, like you said, and reading the room and trying to have to control mom's energy or whoever it is, it's like, I'm not safe unless I make sure everybody else is safe. And we know that that is not humanly possible.
Right, right. And not only that, it's utterly depleting. And when
Totally.
that's the lifestyle, then you become vulnerable to burnout.
Hmm.
And I find in the work that I've done, not just burnout, but also you become vulnerable to chronic health conditions that
Hmm.
become, the body's way of saying that's enough. I can't do it anymore.
And what you said, swept under the rug, that's something that I actually love, not love to study. I'm very intrigued by concept of sweeping under the rug. I've also heard through family work, the secret goes to the grave.
Mm.
We will never talk about this as long as I live. Those types of things. How do you think that that language, because I know you're really, really like focusing on language is really important. So as we look at language like that, how does that impact who we are? If that was the story that was told for the last 100 years.
Well, I think that, and I think you know this, and I certainly have this too. Like um, it's a myth, right?
Mm,
If you sweep it under the rug, it's not gone. You just
mm-hmm,
don't. But
mm-hmm.
well, when we sweep something under the rug, metaphorically, it's, the body is holding it, the nervous system holds it, the protein coats regulating our DNA hold it, and it
Totally.
doesn't go away.
Mm-hmm.
No, it reaches a critical mass. It's at a certain point, and it's sort of called forth for whoever. And you talk about the neuro air. It's whoever sort of takes on the inheritance of being the one to say, "Hey, there's some dirt here under
Mm-hmm.
this metaphorical rug, and it's I can't hold it anymore. It's bothering me. It's destroying my life, and I need to do more than sleep it on the rug. I need to pull the rug back and get it out because it's uncomfortable and I can't live it."
Totally. And I like to say silence is not neutral energy.
Mm-mm. No, in
Silence
fact,
carries weight.
yeah, totally, totally. And again, if you go back to remembering, okay, we're all in some way, shape, or form energetically empathic. You might not be talking about it, but you feel it, you know
Mm-hmm.
it somewhere in you, you're sensing it, and it's not gone.
Mm-hmm.
It is silently pulling the levers. My daughter just had to watch The Wizard of Oz over Thanksgiving break she's in a hero's journey mythology course, which has been so cool. She
Oh,
hates
that
it.
sounds really cool.
I loved it. She's been like, I hate this class. But I was thinking about The Wizard of Oz, right? The guy behind the curtain. It's
Mm-hmm.
like dust that got swept under the rug is behind the curtain pulling all the levers, and it's causing you to react to life. And you don't often know why you have a reaction to it, but it's there. And, until we pull it out and look at it and shine the light on it, it has more control over who you are and how you are than you realize.
Yes, it does. I mean, and what would you say to someone listening that maybe human design is really new, but they also are really aware that they might be the first person in their entire family system to want to start these conversations, to want to say that what's happening in this system is not okay? I want to bring awareness to that. Like, I want to shift that, but I don't know where to start.
Mm. Well, that's like a 5-hour curriculum right there. But I would certainly say,
Maybe we should do that. Maybe you've
right?
already done it.
The very first thing human design teaches you is how to feel into your body, right? How to feel. This feels right for me, and this
Mm,
isn't right for me. This
mm-hmm,
doesn't feel right. Because oftentimes, as we've talked about, that's the very first thing that goes out the window when we are trying to control regulation rather than actually self-regulate, right?
mm-hmm,
That the first thing we oftentimes have to do is we have to shut the body up because the body's screaming, right? It's saying, don't do that. Don't go here. This doesn't feel good.
mm-hmm.
And if we don't have any options to get out of that, and we don't, right? We start our lives as children. What are you going to do? Hey, I don't like this environment. I'm going somewhere else. Like, you don't have anywhere else to go. You're stuck,
There's not
right?
really other options that, yeah.
Right. So, or you can't check out of school, but you can check out of your body.
Mm-hmm,
When we check out of the body, we don't know, we can't feel what's going on. And so we have to start first by feeling what's going on in the body. And that's uncomfortable. It doesn't always feel good, right? And so in the beginning of human design, one of the things you learn is you learn your energy type. There are 5 different energy types in human design, and each energy type has a different way, we call it a strategy, a different way of making a decisions. And everybody has, based on their chart, what's called a unique authority, which is really the prescription for what do I need to pay attention to in my body when I'm making a decision.
mm-hmm.
Does this feel good in my gut? Do I have the energy for this? Is this something in my heart that is going to acknowledge and notice my value? Am I being valued in a situation? Is my instinct telling me something here? Have I given myself enough time to feel my way through it? There are different kinds of authorities and different ways of making decisions based on the configuration of your chart. And that is a process that really is designed to heal the disconnect between who you are and your body. And that first of all, I have to say, in a way, human design is very fun and people love it and it's very sexy and people get into it like Enneagram and all these other things. And they want to use it as a labeling system. I hate it when we
Mm-hmm.
use it that way. It's not what it's about.
Yeah, tell people like why that's so important to not use things like human design as a labeling system.
Well, because you're a dynamic being, you're not static. From moment to moment, you're not who you were the moment before.
Mm-hmm.
And, anytime we start to use a label, no matter what system we use, we start to put ourselves in a box. And when we start to put ourselves in a box, we limit ourselves, and we're limitless beings. There's so much potential for us. And certainly one of the things that I think is really kind of fun with human design is that you're never not all of the human story. You aren't just of this or that. So if there's 5 energy types, you're not just one of those 5 types. You're that plus all the other parts of the human story. It's not really a system that says you're separate over here as this little thing in a box. It says this is the path that you are designed or hardwired to follow to live the entire human condition. And within that, you get to choose how you want to experience it. And you get to use your chart, not so much as a what, but a how that gives you information about how do you choose out of all of these options in the human story, what feels right to you and what is aligned for you. And that alignment piece is really about what feels good for you, right?
Yeah.
What feels good for you. And that changes. It changes all the time, and it changes over the seasons of our life. I mean, you and I were just talking before we went live. I'm a grandmother. Who I am and how I am as a human being, as a woman in the world, as a grandmother, is a whole next level of definition of who I am. It's changed completely the way I see humanity and time and infinity and passion and all the things, right? So we're never one thing, but the how we interact with the world stays relatively consistent. Your reaction maybe changes, but how you experience the world stays consistent. And that code, being able to walk into a room and feel yourself and feel your body and be able to say, this is a space where I feel really good. I can sense that there's this thing over here. It's not, I can be in the presence of whatever this energy might be. I mean, that's something we all need right now at this time in
For
the
sure.
country. Right? I can let them feel like over here is this person that has this very different attitude about whatever, fill in the blank, than me. I can walk into that space and I can be unirritable. I can be uncorruptible in my own connection with myself. And that really is the definition of power and influence and wellness, is to be able to have an uncorrupted connection to yourself.
Which is so important. I think you said this too. My primary audience and my clinical work is young adults. And I think the theme that is the most prevalent is that they do not feel like it is okay for them to just be who they are. And what I'm seeing on social media, I'm in this Facebook group that has over 1 million. It's a parenting group of over 1 million people. And if ever I log in there, there's always a parent saying, have a child going no contact. And this is this new theme, and it's happening with supported therapists too that are helping these young adults, because these young adults don't feel like it's okay for them to be themselves. It's kind of like there's permission. We'll block everything around you that was familiar in your family system. And to me, that doesn't feel like that's overall, that's creating healing, that's creating alignment, that's helping us step into our purpose. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on that, and thoughts from all different angles, including being a parent.
Yeah.
First of all, I will say I don't ever want to say no contact should never be an option, because sometimes it's an important thing.
And sometimes it is needed, especially with levels of abuse and other things. So absolutely. I think what I was referring to is more the theme that is happening with this young adult age group.
I think that, when you try to be tactical and not opinionated. And here's my concern. I do feel like maybe because of the expediency of our culture at the moment, and maybe because we've kind of moved into being somewhat of what I would call a hack culture, where we seem to be culturally addicted to the fastest, quickest route. I do think that sometimes that attitude is disallowing us the curriculum of learning how to deal with difficult and uncomfortable things.
Okay.
That we have learned to check out or to cancel, or whatever term we want to use, when things seem opposite of what we want or seem challenging. And we know from research that following the easy path, and I'm not saying that going no contact is necessarily easy even but avoiding the difficult thing, avoiding how do I sit in a space with someone who, is maybe dysregulated, and I, in that space, have to learn how to hold my own regulation. How do I
For
sit in
sure.
this where I'm being maybe even personally assaulted, verbally, emotionally, and how do I learn to set good, clear boundaries with that?
Right.
And how do I be in those difficult spaces? You're never not going to be in those spaces. If you get into any kind of a relationship, you're not going to never be in those spaces. If
Hmm.
you've got that going on in your core relationships, like your parents, it's pretty solid bet that you're probably going to carry that into your relationships in some way, shape, or form, consciously or unconsciously. And you're going to have to at some point confront those difficult places where you're going to have to say, no matter what's going on around me, I can stay connected to myself.
Hmm.
And if I learn that as a skill set, it's going to make my life bumpy. Because if I get cosmic on it with you for a second, I
Please.
don't think that we are designed to avoid those spaces. We are designed to optimize everything about who we are, to sing our soul song in our loudest, most brilliant way. And avoiding people is never going to get us there. Our challenge is not to, okay, where can I go find the places where I can sing? Our challenge is, how do I sing the song and never care about where I'm singing it? I'm going to sing
Oh,
it
I
wherever
love that.
where I am. That's who I am,
Hmm.
right? And if we don't learn how to stay connected to the body, to recognize what's coming at us. I mean, dealing with parents can be really hard when you're young, especially, right? And you're in
Absolutely.
phase where you're differentiating, you're
Hmm.
trying, who am I not? I'm not my parents. That's usually where we start, right? And then we find out 30 years later, sometimes we are kind
For
of.
sure, aspects that maybe we try to say, I will never do that. I will never be that. And all of a sudden, maybe in your 30s or 40s, you're like, whoa, look at this theme that's still here that I thought I was
Right.
avoiding by never talking about it. But
Right.
actually,
Or
it's still within me.
yeah, I'm really, really tired. I have a new baby. I have a toddler. My money is stressful. Whoops, my mother came out of my mouth, right? It happens because it is until we confront it and look at it and rewire it or recode
Hmm.
it, it's going to be there. And avoiding it isn't going to change it. And so, again, don't want to say there's never a time when that's not appropriate. And I would also say, we have to get better at confronting those hard things and learning how to do it and stay true to ourselves. And again, I think certainly more than anything at this time in our culture, we need that skill set. We need to be able to, right now, this again, Karen's opinion, be able to sit down with people that have opposing viewpoints from ours
Hmm.
and to be able to approach those viewpoints with curiosity and open heartedness and be able to listen and feel and not react, to instead be able to find, even if it's the minute little tiny thread of commonality, although I think usually it's not just a tiny thread, it's a huge thread of commonality, be able to sit in that space and not get disconnected and not go off and create some little group of people on your that's all like-minded and all aligned and all perfect, that and then
Right.
live in that little bubble, because we
Hmm.
can't community or diversity or anything in that energy.
Or sustainability.
And we don't grow.
There's,
We don't
yeah.
grow.
Yeah.
We're not challenged, we don't grow.
Hmm.
And then we stagnate, and then we're bored, and then life is going to inevitably smack you out of it because life wants you to grow.
What if life needs us to grow?
It does. It does. I mean, what's the point, right?
What is the point? That's such a good question. And thank you for touching on that. And I know I kind of threw that out there, but I think a lot of the people that listen and follow that are interested in my work are those that are navigating, how do I now, if I'm the first one in my family to bring to light, these are the patterns that are not okay. These are the things that I want to speak about, again, through the lens of curiosity and really trying to understand maybe why it was never talked about, how that's powerful, and that there is a way, like as we do learn about our own human design and our own unique energy, that can actually support us in navigating moving forward. Does that make sense? Like, can
Totally. Totally. Because what you'll learn to do, and I think human design is a great tool, but it's not the only one, is
Mhm.
you can learn to be, I would say, you can learn to be a screen and not a sponge, right? So
Mm.
you can stand in it, you can see it, you can let it pass through you. You can see it for what it is. You can interpret it because, you're, as it's going through you, you're picking it up and kind of looking at it for a second, but you don't have to be it anymore. And if you're the first one, and you're the one bringing it to light, which you are sometimes, right? It's not always going to be, nobody's going to get excited because you took the dirt out from under the rug. It's not usually,
Can we
it's
say
not,
that again, please? And that's okay? Can we normalize
it's,
that?
it is okay. And I think, we have to also, this is the tricky part. And because it feels so personal, right? It feels so
Because it
personal.
is so personal.
It is. And it's also kind of not at the same time. And the not part is the part that can sometimes be the fuel that keeps us moving forward. And that fuel is you're not just doing it for yourself. I really do believe we do it in all directions of time.
Mhm.
And I certainly think we do it on an ancestral level. I certainly think, when we start to change a dynamic, and in this case, let's say you're changing the dynamic between you and your parents, you're being the cycle breaker.
Right.
You may not realize it, but taking your parents out of that cycle by not reacting in that same way is breaking the cycle for them as well as for yourself. They might not like it because they don't know what else to
Hmm.
do, but you're breaking that cycle for them too. You're saying, we're not doing that anymore.
Hmm.
And what we sometimes forget to talk about is that sometimes our parents learn too, right? They realize, oh, you're right. That wasn't something I should have continued doing because they're also growing, right? They're not static. They're not
Hmm.
staying in the same that you were when they were 16. And I
For
think in our
sure.
culture, we talk so much about trauma and parents and we sometimes forget to add in that there is also a post-traumatic growth curve, right? Not just trauma, but there's also post-traumatic growth. And that when we start breaking the cycles, it changes in the direction of our parents. And certainly it changed the way in which we parent and grandparent.
All
And
directions of time.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I think this is really, really powerful, especially to, I think it's also a way to, it's okay to say it. My parents weren't perfect.
Yeah.
And to be okay with that. I think there's still this fight for perfectionism, especially with social media, right? And what we try to put out as far as content. And when we watch other people's stories in their lives, then maybe we get caught that, oh, I'm not living this perfect life. But I think that this awareness, there is a way to do it with love and compassion. Do you believe that, as far as for ourselves
Oh,
and for our lineage?
totally, totally. I mean, I think being a cycle breaker is the most loving act you can commit for
Wow.
sure. And, basically what you're saying is when you start to break the cycle is you're starting to speak to your parents' authentic self and say, I see your behavior. I see this pattern. That's not who you are.
Hmm.
And I see you behind that, right? That's an act of love. That's an act of, it's an act of courage. And I think what I love so much about human design is it gives us a way to even interpret why our parents sometimes have the narratives that they have.
I'm
When
glad
you
you brought that up. So this is
I mean,
perfect.
so I'll use a story from an example from my own life. So my mother has what's called an open G center, which means when we look at her energy design, she is very variable in how she perceives and
Hmm.
feels love. Now she grew up in a very traumatic environment. She's a Holocaust survivor. She was a baby in the Holocaust. Her mother and her grandmother both purchased false identities to hide out in World War II Europe. Um, they hid out as Catholics, even though they were technically Jewish, or actually Jewish, not technically. And grew up very, very poor. Her dad was killed in the war. It was a very difficult bringing for her, and she brought a lot of trauma into her parenting. And one of her default energetics is she questions her lovability. You can see it in her chart. She questions her lovability, and she has what's called an open spleen, which means she tends to hold on. And I don't have those energies in my chart at all. And for me, when I became of age and decided to go off and do my own life, right? She got very angry with me
Mm.
and basically said that, I mean, we had a long ongoing sort of emotional gun battle for 10 years about how I abandoned her and I left her alone and she used a lot of guilt and shame about me running off and going and doing my own thing, which was, developmentally normal. What was I going to do?
Hmm.
Live it for the rest of my life? And I was, and her response to that was to really go kind of into revenge mode, right? She really kind of wanted to hurt me back for leaving, for growing up in a
Hmm.
way, right? That was very confusing to me because I was like, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do and you're mad at me. And when I finally pulled her human design chart many years later, I was like, wonder, right?
Mm,
She's got all this abandonment. She already has all this abandonment stuff from
it was
having a father
way
that
before you came
right.
into the picture.
It was coded into her chart that that was going to be a continued issue for her. And I, with my defined G and my defined spleen energies that complemented her sensitivity, when I took my energy away, I took a big part of how she experienced the world with
Hmm.
me energetically. And of course, she reacted. And it wasn't personal. It wasn't about me. It never was about me. It was about my leaving triggered her questioning her own lovability. And when I could see that and really recognize she was reacting to feeling abandoned instead of being mad at me, right? And I could reframe that whole thing, it was so healing, so very healing for both of us. And I've never had a conversation with her where I've said, you know, Mom, in those years when I moved out, you
Hmm.
were so mad at me, that was because of your abandonment. We never had the psychological conversation. I just stopped caring about it. Honestly, I stopped caring about it other than to be compassionate about, oh, that was my mom's experience. It
Hmm.
wasn't even perfect.
And
And
that her
just that,
experience didn't have to be yours.
right, right. And then I also didn't have to internalize it.
Mm-hmm.
And just that small shift in, oh, I see this differently now. She wasn't angry with me. She was feeling abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to come back to that relationship with compassion. And really, I love my mother's inner child so much because I see, especially, it's really interesting because she's 85 now. And it's almost like that inner child part of her is much more a part of her personality now. Because she's vulnerable. She's an older
Mm-hmm.
woman. Her body's starting to fail her a little bit. And there is a vulnerability there. And I don't
For
like the
sure.
analogy about you become your parents' parent when they're age. I don't like
Mm-hmm.
that. To me, it's a little dishonoring, but she is vulnerable. And I am, in some ways, in more of a caretaker role for her in every way. And I see that little girl, like that grew up without a dad and that felt so abandoned and is so deeply connected to her family. And I love that little girl in her so much. Like that, it brings out a protectiveness in me now that I want to protect that little girl too in her because something about that little girl made my mother decide to be a cycle breaker, even though she didn't do it.
For sure.
You know, it's taken 3 generations
Mm-hmm.
to break cycles. Like I think my daughter now, who has 3 children, is a much better mother than either my mother or I were because she's got a whole different lineage now than what my mother and I started off with.
For sure. And I think too, like what you just said, like your awareness in your own work, and especially with human design and quantum human design, like I was just thinking, like, oh my, what would have Karen's relationship been like with her mom if she had not known this? Like,
Right.
how could that have changed the trajectory of relationship and the relationships in the future, right? Your daughter and grandchildren with your relationship with your own mother, if you wouldn't have had that.
Well, that whole no contact thing, I probably
Yeah.
would have done that because I
Hmm.
definitely had several. I mean, we definitely had a couple of years where I was like, I'm just not even going to talk to this person anymore
Right.
because she's nuts. And it wasn't
Hmm.
her, it was her wound.
And I think I love you said inner child. I think you know I do a lot of parts work and inner child work. And I think if we remember like what Dr. Schwartz says of IFS is like once we become aware of those parts, our job isn't to make them go away. It's
Mm.
just to be aware of them and to create relationships with them. And if I was working with your mom today, I would want to help her see that inner child part that she could feel love for who she was and who she is and that there could be new options now. That's, I think, the most powerful part for me in parts work is when we work with that inner child, that inner child could feel love, support, and safety. And that
Yeah.
even though that was so many years ago, that through visualization, through our language, through our work, that those parts of us and that inner child can feel that now.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And I love that. And I love that we live at this time and we have people like you doing that work because, you know, I see these parts of my mother, but
Mm-hmm.
she doesn't. You
Mm-hmm.
know, she still reacts from the wound.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me so sad because I just wonder, you know, at this time in her life, like how much her life has been spent protecting this part of
For
herself that
sure.
never come out.
Mm-hmm. But we can do that now at any age. So two more questions as we kind of wrap up. When you think about your work in quantum human design, which just the word quantum for me and for anyone listening, I love it. I feel like it's expansive instead of restrictive. Like
Mhm.
it feels like there's open possibilities. How do you how do you see that intersects with becoming a neuro heir, being the first one maybe in your lineage to be aware that I maybe have inherited this nervous system, but now through love and compassion and my own work and regulation, I can change the trajectory of, like you said, these timelines.
Well, I think when we start talking about quantum, what we're really talking about is choice, right?
Mhm.
That in the way in which we create our lives, we're basically consciously or unconsciously choosing out a semi-infinite box of options, right? So if we think about a story or an archetype, parts of a story, an archetype has an infinite number of ways of showing up. And we get to choose how we want the archetypes, the parts of our story to show up. And when we are living as quantum humans, we are consciously looking at all the options and picking the options that represent the optimized version of ourselves.
Mhm.
So, to me, quantum is choice. So when we look at human design, traditional human design, I see that as a pathway that contains a prescription for healing.
Mhm.
That prescription for healing is really about getting back in touch with the body. And when we practice that over time and that becomes our consistent way of living, really what that only does is it brings us to baseline, right? Being able to feel your body and navigate your body, that's baseline. That's like, I always struggle a bit with the obsession that I feel like our culture has with the term survivor, right? It's
Mhm.
like surviving is kind of a minimal standard when you really think about what is a survivor? Well, you lived. Awesome. Now what,
For
right? And
sure.
so
And how many people
when
stay in that I'm living space instead of
right,
anything else outside of that?
right. And so when we start thinking about who we are is basically a code of information on the quantum level, and what we end up experiencing is basically a result of where we end up focusing our energy and attention consciously and unconsciously. And if we start taking back conscious control over where we're focusing our
Mhm.
energy, and we start focusing on how do we go beyond survival and start choosing an identity that supports our thriving in the world, and how do we habitually and consistently and in a practice choose every day to thrive and really take that thriving as far as we can go from birth to death. That's a pretty fun adventure.
It's a pretty fun adventure. And speaking of adventures, thinking about this brand new year, 2026, what's ahead?
Oh my God. I would say what's not ahead is 2025, thank God. So, when we look at the celestial weather for the year ahead, I'll certainly say 2025 was a year of shock and disruption.
Amen to
and,
that.
and that disruption, disruption has a very important role to play when we look at
Mhm.
systems. Disruption is really a symptom of having outgrown systems. And I definitely think we've outgrown a lot of our systems, and it's time for something new and something better. And I would say 2026 is really going to give us the call to get serious about our focus, to get serious about really not only answering the question, what do I want, but consciously start constructing the foundation to lay that foundation for what's next. And so certainly I would say 2025 may have felt cataclysmic and kind of gooey.
Mhm.
I think 2026 is going to give us a lot more momentum, but also, some more fire. Um, some more, here's how I would put where we
Which
are
I'm
right
like, I feel
now.
like that has to be like the fire. Like that's not, that's,
It's catalytic. It's
yeah.
catalytic. But it's almost like the way I would see it right now is we're walking on this path. We're going to get to where we need to go no matter what. We are. It's,
Mhm.
as we talked about, growth is inevitable. It's the imperative of the universe or God or whatever word you want to put in there. If we get off the path, it's lined with barbed wire. And that's the part that feels really uncomfortable, right? And we've been bumping into barbed wire for a while now. I think next year we're going to start to figure out, oh, I shouldn't get off this path. That's not a good idea. I'm just going to keep moving forward. And I think if we can get to 2027, I think we're going to start to feel like, okay, we can do this.
Well, I love that. And I love that you said path. So, for those of you that didn't listen, the New Year's Eve episode was a meditation and kind of about the path of facing our warrior self and turning towards our higher self. And so that kind of feels totally aligned. So, if you haven't listened to that, please take a listen. That was my gift to you. And also, if you feel like human design, you're called to that. If this seems interesting, if you're curious, Karen, how can they find your work and how can they start exploring human design and again as this tool to use in this new year?
So probably the first place to go is just visit our website, quantumhumandesign.com. When you're there, you have the ability to, if you know your birthday, birth time, and birthplace, get your free chart. That chart is going to come in, it's encoded in what we call quantum language. So you'll get to look at your trajectory and sort of figure out where on that trajectory are you? What do you want to choose? Where do you want to grow? And what do you want to grow towards?
I hope you guys check that out. And just to kind of wrap up, I just want to thank you, Karen, for this conversation. Anytime I talk to you, I feel more alive, invigorated, and Karen has really become an amazing mentor to me. And I just want to say thank you. I think the book, starting this podcast, all of that was kind of became an invitation from you, which I know you said was already within me. But as we think about human design and my energy, responding to things outside of me is really important. And so as you're listening, your body is responding to what you're hearing today, just like as and anything else that we take in. So if you feel called, please check out her website and her work. It's blessed my life. It's helped me overcome a lot of burnout and learn to say no, which is something I didn't know how to do for almost 40 years of my life, and help me step into this place of alignment. So, Karen, any last words before we hop off?
Just stay true to yourself. And if you don't know how, go figure it out. However you get there. I don't care if it's yoga. I don't care if it's mushrooms, whatever it is. Find yourself and be the person you were born to be, because the world really needs you to be that person.
The world does need you, and that it's more than okay for you to be you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
for sure.
thanks so much. Bye, guys.
Thank